Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would take a look at this video and talk about this subject that I found to be very particularly interesting. And this, of course, is once again going to be somewhat over the Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney situation, but a little bit more on the potentiality of there being a Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis rematch and comparing the two situations because of course a lot of people are talking about the weight differences. Of course there was Ryan Garcia came in overweight by I believe about 3 pounds over the 140-pound weight limit against that of Devin Haney. And of course Ryan Garcia, he was weight drained, or there was a catch weight at least, I believe to about 137 or 137.5, so not exactly a 140, against that of Gervonta Tank Davis. There's been many people, of course, arguing for either side that, one side had a clear advantage, and that was it really that fighter, or were they really facing the fighter at a fair advantage, or excuse me, on a fair playing field, or was there a clear major advantage to where that was the main factor of why that fighter ended up winning? Anyways, I'm going to review this video by Dante's Boxing Nation. And in regular Dante's Boxing Nation fashion, he's going to, of course, completely overall side with his favorite fighter, overall, or one of his favorite fighters in Devin Haney. And of course, overall go with the point that Ryan Garcia coming in 3 pounds overweight was this massive advantage. And I'm not stating that, of course, that it was not a physical and mental edge for Ryan Garcia. I believe that it probably was. But to state or to kind of concur that that's the main reason why Ryan Garcia ended up winning, especially in that dominant of a fashion, at least in the second half of the fight, no, I just can't agree with that. Because once again, Ryan Garcia looked to me like he did not have the same level of conditioning in his past level fights. He was breathing very heavily from the mouth. He was backing up a certain amount of the times, keeping his hands down, not really using his lead hand. Of course, some of these also can be, also probably, led to just certain boxing deficiencies in his style. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And then, of course, you have the Gervonta Tank Davis situation where Ryan Garcia was drained by that of 3 pounds, or that there was a catch weight. But anyways, we're going to talk about it because, Dante's Boxing Nation, he never fails overall to somewhat keep the same energy. Now, these are a little bit different of standards, of course, but I'm going to talk about, in my view, about how much the weight may have potentially affected both fighters, just in my personal view, because, of course, this is the type of perfect video, in my view, to compare the two different fights.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Okay, so if you've ever heard somebody trying to convince you that 2 plus 2 is 5, well, this clip that I'm about to play for you guys is pretty much how that conversation would sound. Ryan Garcia's father, he did a recent interview where he was trying to explain why it makes sense to fight Gervonta Tank Davis at 143 or 144, but it makes absolutely no sense to fight Devin Haney in a rematch at all, even if it is at 143, 144, or even at 147. Ryan has made it very clear that he has no interest in a Devin Haney rematch at all. And listen, if Ryan Garcia doesn't want to give Devin Haney a rematch, that's his prerogative. It doesn't really matter to me if he's giving him a rematch right now. But the question is, if Ryan Garcia...
And you notice that Dante's Boxing Nation stated that, it's right now, So what Dante's Boxing Nation is basically going to do, he's going to state that later on that if Ryan Garcia doesn't give Devin Haney a rematch, that he's quote unquote ducking him, which they don't state that for their favorite fighters if they end up over winning a match that was looked at as very close, like Haney versus Lomachenko. But to be fair, a lot of boxing fans do that. Anyways, when it comes down to it, but that's also another point as to why Dante, once again, I keep telling people all he is pretty much a fan who's very racially motivated. He's not an objective nor a logical commentator, but anyways, when it comes down to it, like I stated, do I believe that the best thing for either of these fighters, for Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney, is to have an immediate rematch? No, I don't. Because I think that for Ryan Garcia, that your marketability is at the highest right now. In my view, if I'm Oscar De La Hoya, I'm trying to get him in the ring with Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Subriel Matias, maybe a Mario Barrios, some other guys like that. I've heard rumors and people tell me that he might fight against who's that one skyscraper that fights at 154. That one big Mexican fighter, Sebastian Fondora, that's his name. I've heard rumors of that. I mean, to me, that fight just doesn't make any sense at the current moment in time. And Gervonta Ennis, neither of those fights really make that much sense to me. When possibly they might have to happen at a catchweight. And Ryan just got the biggest win of his career. He's never even won an official belt, and you can make so much more marketable fights off of him right now, and it'd be looked at as acceptable because I think people still take a look at Ryan Garcia as someone that is a little bit of a flawed boxer. So you could literally, for the next several fights in Ryan Garcia's career, you could put him in the ring against Rolly Romero, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Subriel Matias, and there'd be no, junk about it. There'd basically be no complaints about it. So why the hell would you want to put him in the ring with Sebastian Fondura, someone that's going to be way lengthier and way taller than him, overall and bigger than him? Why would you want to do that against a guy that's very tough, a guy that's going to be hard to reach, and a guy that just, of course, Tim Tszyu was compromised to a degree, but, still, of course, ended up winning the fight against Tim Tszyu, or fight Gervonta Ennis, that killer. Like, to me, those fights just don't make any sense. If I'm Oscar De La Hoya, I'm trying to put Ryan Garcia against Barrios, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, maybe even Rolly Romero's ass, so he can retire him. When it comes down to it, Ryan, of course, retiring Rolly. If it goes as expected, and maybe some other fights. I'm not trying to put Ryan Garcia in the ring right now with anyone that, in my view, is at the 147-pound limit, unless I believe overall that he can truly handle them. Because Ryan right now, he might debatably right now be the face of boxing just in terms of being the most talked about boxer of this year. Now, of course, in terms of consistency, it's probably more Canelo Alvarez and Gervonta Tank Davis. But Ryan Garcia, he has a great amount of followers, and almost everybody is talking about this win. So this definitely did a great amount for his career, and he already had a big fan base before this. So once again, we'll see where it goes.
Is not interested in fighting.
But once again, as for Ryan Garcia, I think that if he fights Devin Haney in a rematch, which is still a very risky fight, if he ends up losing, of course, Ryan Garcia is still going to be looked at in somewhat of relative high esteem, but not in quite as high esteem as what he once was. And if you have Ryan Garcia in those fights that I mentioned, in my view, you can get mega bucks off of all those fights, and you can have Ryan Garcia pile up wins against every single one of those fighters and even build his brand and his experience and his danger level even more. So why the hell would you want to put him in the ring with some of those other guys? And as for Devin Haney, if he ends up beating that of Ryan Garcia, of course he gets great revenge, and that's great for him. Maybe there's even potentially a trilogy. But if he loses to Ryan Garcia, that is pretty much going to put any potentiality of those big fights of Teofimo Lopez or, overall Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson especially, especially against the more elite black fighters, black American fighters that he could potentially make big fights with. Pretty much all those fights are going to go straight down the shitter. So, and Devin Haney, if he loses to Ryan Garcia, more than likely, he's going to get hurt very badly again. Because Ryan Garcia, in my view, in order to beat Devin Haney, he does have to hurt him bad. And I think that even Ryan Garcia knows that to a certain degree. But I could be wrong. I don't know. But if Devin Haney were to lose the rematch against Ryan Garcia, I'm not going to state that his career would be pretty much over, but it pretty much would be over in terms of a standpoint of potentially being one of the bigger names in boxing.
Devin Haney again, who is he going to fight? Is he going to take over the responsibility of trying to fight the best? Is he going to do what Devin Haney was attempting to do? Because Devin Haney was planning on going after Subriel Matias after this. Devin wanted them all. So the question is, what is Ryan planning on doing? Who is he planning on fighting in his next 2 or 3 fights?
I will give Devin Haney that much credit. Of course, a lot of people, they're shitting on that of Devin Haney right now. Let me overall take the quote from Boxing Ego overall that I like to give people their flowers as well. Boxing Ego always states that whenever one of his favorite fighters loses, and he wants you to have more sympathy for them when they lost, but he doesn't have the same standards for other fighters that end up losing, including Devin Haney, because he's not a PBC nut hugger, and he's a guy that was going against his boy Gervonta Tank Davis. But I give Devin Haney a certain amount of flowers. He gets a lot of credit for me because, at the end of the day, Devin Haney was willing to basically step in the ring with everybody. Now, if you want to debate, the size advantage, of course, that he had in certain fights, or the quality of some of those opponents, all that's up to you. But at the end of the day, he fought George Kambosos when he was coming off of the win over Teofimo Lopez. He fought Vasily Lomachenko when he was still looked at as a relative, very good to great A-grade level fighter. Of course, he probably had the clear size advantage, but Lomachenko was still a very tough cookie to fight. He is not an easy fight, and that was a fight that, in my view, could have went either way. And then, of course, he beat the hell out of Regis Prograis, and then he stepped in the ring with Ryan Garcia. So that's at least one thing that Devin Haney gets credit for me, is that he pretty much has been willing to fight that of everybody. And you can't state that about every fighter around his weight class, or even every fighter in boxing. Like even some of the guys that are alleged boogeymen in boxing, like Devin Haney could have went the Demetrius Bubo Andrade route, and not tried to sign with his own and not tried to sign with these other guys and bitch, moan, and complain overall, once again about not getting certain fights, or turning down certain deals and then complaining about how some of the top guys, overall are avoiding him, when he also really has no fan base whatsoever. He could have been Terrence Bud Crawford and bitch, moan, and complain about how no one's fighting him, even though he's on the complete opposite side of the street with the PBC, and you sign with the top ranked person in Bob Arum, to where for sure that he doesn't work with the PBC and Al Heyman very well. Overall, he could have went the Terrence Bud Crawford route and bitch, moan, and complain overall that he couldn't get any of those fights, even though he did not sign with the PBC. He could have went either of those guys' route, but that's not what Devin Haney did. What Devin Haney did is the same thing that Errol Spence Jr. did, is the same thing that other fighters did that are great. They forced themselves into those positions. Devin Haney overall did his mandatory positions. He got certain belts. He forced certain people. He embarrassed certain people to get in the ring. And he called out clearly overall which people that he wanted to face. So good on Devin Haney. I give him a lot of credit. A lot of credit.
After Ryan Garcia beat Devin Haney, in the ring, he said he would give Devin a rematch. Of course, when he got to the post-fight press conference, he said absolutely no rematch. Then he started saying he was interested in fights with Rolly, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, or even Sebastian Fundora at 150.
And of course, let me not forget, he could have also went the Gervonta Tank Davis route, where he said he's going to knock this guy out or beat this guy or beat that guy, but then never mention their name again in terms of a serious negotiation agreement. He could have went that route as well, but he didn't.
Before, or I guess at a catchweight perhaps. Now, you know what? Before I go any further with that point, let me go ahead and play this clip. This is exactly what Ryan Garcia's father said to Miller City Boxing.
He's history, bro. Let's move on. We're not gonna give him a rematch for what? You only give somebody a rematch when the fight is close. Close to the point where, like, damn, this could have gone either way. Let's run it back. Okay. But when you got an ass kicking, like what Ryan did to Haney.
Well, listen, in my view, Devin Haney ended up winning about 5 rounds within this fight. Now, if you wanted to debate, maybe it could have been 6 rounds to 6. Maybe. I think that's being a bit generous, but that's up to you. I could also maybe potentially see 8 rounds to 4 for Ryan Garcia. There was some real, swing rounds within this fight. So to be honest, it wasn't the easiest fight to score, other than, probably the clear Ryan Garcia rounds. But, and probably some of the first rounds of the first half for Devin Haney. But, the first round, definitely a Ryan Garcia round. The 6th round I did give to Garcia, but some may debate that that was a swing round. The 7th round obviously went to Ryan Garcia. The 8th round, some would debate maybe either way, but I gave it to Garcia. 9th round, of course, I thought went to Haney. And then, of course, the rest of the rounds I thought went to Ryan Garcia. But, I'm not going to say that Devin Haney didn't make it somewhat competitive in spots. But Ryan Garcia completely dominated the second half of the fight. And that is what made it a little bit, overall more in the favor of Ryan Garcia. Once again, I scored it 114 to 110.
Rematch, he'll kill him next time.
So why ask for a Tank rematch then?
At a catchweight. At a catchweight, 43,
well, why
44.
Do the same thing? Why wouldn't you do the same thing for Haney this time?
Because did Tank Davis kick Ryan's ass at 100% condition, or were there stipulations? There were definite stipulations. But if you want to do it the real way, let's do it the real way. No stipulations. Let's go 143. We fought Haney the real way. That's the difference. The real way. And that's why we ain't going to give him no rematch. He don't deserve it. He got it.
And what that is really stating overall for Henry Garcia is that in Ryan Garcia's mind, then this is pretty much what I've been stating all along. I don't really personally think that the 3 pounds that it really gave Ryan Garcia this massive advantage over Devin Haney. I think it gave Ryan Garcia really more of an edge within his mind. And I think that Ryan Garcia, that more than likely that he probably was drinking a little bit here and there. He probably was partying a little bit here and there. He probably was overall, eating a little bit too much here and there. I don't think that he ever wanted to make the weight. I don't think he ever cared to. I think overall that he planned to go as low overall as what he felt comfortable with, not to come super far over the weight, but he didn't give a shit whether he made the weight or not, and then basically that'd be the end of it. So Ryan Garcia clearly did that for a little bit of his own physical advantage and, of course, a little bit of a mental edge. But I don't think that it was anywhere near enough to state that he was cheating necessarily, or that that's the reason why Devin Haney lost the fight. Because when you consider the fact that Ryan Garcia clearly did not look as conditioned, in my view, that extra 3 pounds, it pretty much cancels out, because Ryan Garcia, I think, really was just trying to feel more of a mental edge from that, really, than what he really was a physical edge. Devin Haney, of course, he's, recently moved to the 140-pound weight class. He looked perfectly fine in his last fight. So when people are stating all this stuff about Ryan Garcia either being a weight bully or Haney being that much more drained, no, I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. All right, it is what it is. Now, of course, every extra pound matters when you're trying to lose weight. But when you talk about the level of conditioning that Ryan had, I mean, it pretty much canceled out, at least, to a degree to where it wasn't such a massive advantage like what a lot of people were trying to debate that it was.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather fight Cruz or Teofimo now.
But I'm saying, though, just and I'm not a defense to anybody, but at the end of the day, keeping it funky, it's just like you guys had the advantage on this fight. Tank had his advantage with your. If you know.
Wait. What do you mean we had the advantage on this fight? What do you mean by that?
You didn't weigh in at 140 pounds. He did.
Okay, so you're saying so you're an advocate of the 3 pounds?
Now, I thought that was really funny. I'm going to let this play, but
Well, listen, at the end of the day, Mr. Henry Garcia, Ryan Garcia did not make the weight. He did not overall make the weight overall with that of Devin Haney. So, yes, there was, to a degree, some sort of slight advantage for that of Ryan Garcia. At the end of the day, of course, it does matter when you're trying to lose pounds. Now, the question is how much of an advantage really was it actually? And in my view, once again, when you count the conditioning that Ryan Garcia was in and the fact that Devin Haney was supposed to be the far superior boxer, I mean, to me, really, even though people, of course, keep bringing up the 3 pounds, it pretty much was on even playing terms, because Devin Haney was supposed to win this fight really with not a whole lot of issues, and Ryan Garcia was not in completely the right place mentally. He was a dude to where he was very focused. I'm not stating that he wasn't focused, but he had so much pressure on himself within this fight. He had to have some sort of mental edge, overall coming into this fight, or he was just going to have a mental breakdown. Ryan Garcia, once again, had so much pressure on himself throughout this fight. He was extremely nervous. He was a mental wreck, and you could even see it in the first beginning of the fight, because every time that the ref would kind of split them up, and every time overall that he wouldn't allow Ryan Garcia maybe to hit on the inside, Ryan Garcia would always complain. So even Ryan Garcia knew that at times that Devin Haney, if I'm going to beat this guy, overall, I'm going to have to do certain things to get my edge in. I'm going to have to hurt him. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that. So the extra 3 pounds, had it been under regular circumstances, I think that I would probably state that it would have been a little bit more of an advantage for Ryan. And even then, in my view, I don't know if it would have been, because 3 pounds really isn't that much in my view. Of course, it's a slight advantage, but once again, when you really talk about the level of conditioning that Ryan Garcia was in, and the fact that Devin Haney just recently moved up to 140 anyway, it's not like he's a David Benavidez where more than likely he can't fit at 168 anymore. Devin Haney just recently moved to 140, so in my view, it's really not that big of an advantage, even if Ryan Garcia came into the best conditioning of his life. But when you, once again, clock in the fact that Ryan Garcia was not in the best conditioning of his life, then it basically was on an even playing field.
thought that was
And Devin Haney was the more conditioned fighter of the two.
pretty funny how Ryan Garcia's father, he tried to make it sound as if anyone that would address the fact that Ryan Garcia didn't make weight is a part of some different kind of party. Like they're some type of conspiracy theorist. But it's not up for debate. It's a fact that Ryan Garcia didn't make weight, and he didn't even attempt to lose the 3.2 pounds. And not only that, but everyone is talking about the fact that Ryan Garcia didn't make weight. And when I say everybody, I'm talking about
When DontaesBoxingNation is talking about everybody, he's talking about everyone that that he really needs to be on his agenda. That's why, whenever he talked about the Fury versus Wilder situation, he always did that shit. Overall, about everyone's talking about the glove gate and all this other stuff. Well, yeah, eventually people are going to talk about it because everyone else is talking about it. But, yeah, there's some people overall talking about the weight, but there's also a lot of people overall that really ain't buying into that shit either.
From Mexican boxers like David Benavidez, Mario Barrios, Tim Bradley, to trainers and analysts like Teddy Atlas. I mean, you can't keep reminding people about the Gervonta Davis rehydration clause.
Right, but let's also be real. David Benavidez and Mario Barrios, like those guys are basically two pawns that are used by you. When it comes down to it. And I'm not stating that what they stated maybe overall was not realistic, but anything that Benavidez and Mario Barrios says, you almost kind of have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt because they're very, good, on good terms with the LDBC and new media. And I'm not a person, once again, that tries to at all state that just because a boxer states something that, they may have always secret motivations. But, once again, don't be surprised at those guys because they're on very good terms with the LDBC and new media. They give those guys promotion overall for Mexican fighters, and they give them more of a fan base. Because they also help the LDBC and new media. David Benavidez helps them tear down Canelo Alvarez, who they need to tear down extraordinarily badly, extremely badly. And of course, also they used Mario Barrios to make Gervonta Tank Davis, overall look better or make that win look better than what it actually was.
But you don't want anyone to even talk about the fact that Ryan Garcia didn't make weight.
So you're an advocate of the 3 pounds?
No, I just believe that when people are aware of what's going on throughout the fight, it's just it gives it room to say, hey, I could do a rematch and do it on these terms.
Well, bro, don't mince words. At the end of the day, you sound like you are an advocate overall for the arguments with the 3 pound overall advantage. Overall, with it, being, somewhat of an advantage. Don't mince words. At the end of the day, you seem overall like you think it's an advantage. Once again, I think for Ryan Garcia, it was more of a mental edge. I don't think that it was as much of a physical edge as what people are trying to allege at all. To be honest, I really don't think that Ryan Garcia had the physical edge within this fight. I think that Haney had the physical edge within this fight because he was the more well-conditioned fighter. And I just don't see him as some guy that was just that weak and all sorts of stuff. And Ryan was walking right through him. If Devin Haney was really that weak, he would have got knocked down in round 7 when he got hit with that left hook. The fact that Devin Haney, once again, got up from probably really should have been 4 or 5 different knockdowns, which is interesting that Dante doesn't mention that, by the way, because that's all we heard, whenever it came to Tyson Fury versus Wilder about how terrible the referee was, but then when it came to this one, there's no mention of it. When it comes down to, once again, I don't really think Ryan Garcia really had the physical advantage whatsoever. I think that weight gave him, the form to where he felt his physical best, and I think that Ryan really needed that in order for, in his mind, to win this fight.
Didn't you hear Ryan say that he can't make 140, bro?
So that's what I'm saying. 143, 144. Was it worth it? The money worth it for this fight?
Bro, did you see the whipping that Devin Haney took?
So like I was telling you guys before this clip, what Ryan Garcia's father was saying, it did not add up because he completely contradicted himself. And let me make this very clear as well. You cannot compare the Gervonta Davis Ryan Garcia fight to the Devin Haney Ryan Garcia fight when it comes to going into the fight with an advantage. Because in the Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight, they agreed to all of the terms before they even started to train for the fight. At the time Ryan fought Gervonta, Ryan was already fighting.
Right, but Dante, what does that really have to do overall with someone still changing their weight? Now, of course, one could maybe argue that, well, overall, they had all that time, to get down to the weight, so overall Ryan Garcia, he still had that extra time. He knew, prior time in advance to get down to that weight, so he had the adequate amount of time. Devin Haney was kind of fooled into making 140, and Ryan Garcia, of course, missed the pounds by 3 pounds. And, of course, that's somewhat relevant. But if we were going to argue, in my view, about what is more damaging to a fighter by fighting a fighter that comes in 3 pounds over the weight class, or a fighter having to drain themselves, probably 3 pounds overall, under the weight class, yeah, I would probably say the latter, probably the catch weight. Because people, Dante and all these other guys are talking about how Ryan, that he can't make 140. Okay, well then, if that's the case, overall, then why are we giving Gervonta Tank Davis that much credit? Because he weight drained Ryan Garcia at 137 pounds. Why then was it not held at 140 pounds if we're going to overall bring up that weight? And I'm not, an advocate of that excuse either. But at the end of the day, this stuff about, Haney was, clearly outsized and a guy to where overall he was clearly weaker. Like, give me a fucking break. Devin Haney just recently moved to 140. Like, I'm not trying to hear any of that. And I'm also not really trying to hear the Ryan Garcia excuse either, when he lost to Tank overall by losing 3 pounds. At the end of the day, Ryan Garcia had one fight at 140 pounds. He fought the rest of his fights at 135. He had one fight at 140. Then they had to catch weight at 137. Now, of course, would Ryan Garcia probably had possibly more of a chance had it been a 140? Maybe. But at the end of the day, that's not really the main reason why Ryan Garcia lost the fight. And it's the same reason why Devin Haney also did not mainly lose the fight against that of Ryan Garcia.
At 135. So he agreed to fight Gervonta at 136. And he agreed to the rehydration clause. But the massive difference is in that fight, both fighters made weight.
Right, but once again, they made weight, but probably not at the weight that Ryan Garcia would have been the most comfortable at. At least one thing that you can argue about the Devin Haney situation is that Devin Haney was at a comfortable weight, or at least that he already knew that he had to get there, overall. Now, of course, Ryan Garcia also knew that he had to get there, but Ryan Garcia really didn't want that fight there. He wanted it at 140, but he didn't have a choice because Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, is the clear A side.
And there is no advantage for either fighter because both fighters had to do the exact same things to make that fight come to fruition.
Right, so does that mean overall that Manny Pacquiao and Oscar De La Hoya, that overall that just because they had to make weight, that overall that they had to do overall the exact same things, they had to make the exact same weight, and they both made weight? Does that mean overall that Manny Pacquiao did not have the advantage in that fight in terms of the weight because he didn't have to drain himself anywhere near as much? That doesn't make any sense, Dante.
Both fighters had to make weight, and both fighters could not come in over the rehydration clause limit. And the Haney versus Garcia.
Right, but it's very clear that Gervonta Tank Davis is not as big as what Ryan Garcia is. That's like me taking a look overall at a fighter, and taking a look at Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez, and there being a rehydration clause or a catchweight overall, and Canelo states, oh, well, David Benavidez, I'll fight you, but you know what? We're going to have this fight at 166, overall. And then on top of that, there's no rehydration clause over that of 190, overall when it comes down to the 185. Of course it's not going to matter because Canelo Alvarez only rehydrates to about 185. David Benavidez can possibly rehydrate overall to 200 plus pounds. So, of course, it's not going to matter for Gervonta Tank Davis. And it's not like Gervonta Tank Davis, once again, it's not like he don't rehydrate pretty heavy. But, Ryan Garcia, I'm willing to bet rehydrates heavier.
Fight, Ryan Garcia, he agreed to fight Devin Haney at 140. When he knew from the very beginning he was not going to make 140 because Ryan couldn't even make 140 in his previous fight. So Ryan could have easily told Devin Haney when they were negotiating the fight, let's make the fight at 143 or 144 because I'm not sure I can make 140. But of course, Ryan wasn't going to do that because if he did that, then him coming in overweight and not making weight would not be an advantage. You can only benefit if your opponent is thinking that you're going to make weight while he's doing all of the work running a marathon, a day before the weigh-in trying to make weight.
Well, you can argue once again that that's a side advantage for Ryan Garcia. But like I said, it pretty much cancels out with his level of conditioning and and some of the other factors. But at the end of the day, I understand what DontaesBoxingNation is trying to state. But Dante's point right now is basically stating that, because of a catchweight, in certain, fights that, those fighters really are on even terms, because they're doing the same amount of work. No, because at the end of the day, like if you have Mayweather, fight that to Sergio Martinez during his prime, and if they have a catchweight at 155, just because they're both expected to make 155, that doesn't mean overall that doesn't mean that they're both at an even advantage because Sergio Martinez doesn't really make 155. So that point really doesn't make any sense. But I wouldn't really expect much else from DontaesBoxingNation.
You cannot compare this fight to Haney versus Regis Prograis or Davis versus Ryan Garcia because both fighters had to do all of the work, which is making the weight.
Well, what you can't really compare this to is Devin Haney versus Regis Prograis because Devin Haney and Regis Prograis, they were both 140 pounders. Devin Haney had recently just moved up to the weight for the first time, and both fighters overall looked in prime condition. So there's really no excuses as to why Regis Prograis got his ass whooped as badly as what he did. And I understand that people will state that, Devin Haney, he was a decent amount bigger. He rehydrated to 165, and that's something that you can state too. Of course, we know that Dante would state that with Canelo and some of the other fighters if he needed to. Tyson Fury. But at the end of the day, when you talk about the standards of this, yes, you of course can bring up how catchweight does limit certain fighters. Now, in my view, did it limit Ryan Garcia to the point to where that's why he lost Gervonta Tank Davis? No. Do I think that, of course, that in Ryan Garcia's mind that he would have been better at 140? Yeah, probably. But do I think that it made him a way lesser version of himself, or really that much of a lesser version of himself? No, not really.
In those fights. Now, speaking of weight, the problem with Ryan Garcia is he's most likely going to try to create his own Canelo Alvarez weight classes, like Canelo used to do when he was at 154. He couldn't make 154 anymore, so he would fight everyone at a catch weight. And this is what it seems like Ryan is attempting to do, because his father, once again, is talking about still fighting against junior welterweights, Teofimo Lopez, Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Now, if they're not willing to move up in weight or fight him at a higher catch weight, then where does Ryan Garcia go? The only weight class it seems like Ryan Garcia is comfortably going to be able to make is 147, fighting at welterweight.
Well, I believe that Ryan Garcia, I believe that more than likely he can make 140 if he really tried, but he may not really give a shit too. So we'll see what Ryan Garcia does. I wouldn't be surprised at all. We'll see what happens.
But if he moves up there, just like Mario Barrios said, there's a very good chance he will no longer have a weight advantage going into those fights. I'll close out with saying this. Ryan Garcia's father, he actually said before the Gervonta Tank Davis fight in an interview that Ryan Garcia, he's not at a disadvantage fighting against Gervonta at all with the rehydration clause. He says because 10 pounds is what Ryan Garcia rehydrates to already. And one last point. Some of my Mexican viewers were in my comment section. They were saying, you didn't say anything about when Shakur didn't make weight against Kasakiao, or when Charlo didn't make weight against Jose Benavidez. Now,
agreed, you didn't, and the reason why you didn't comment on that, let's keep it funky. At the end of the day, because the right fighters in those fights ended up winning.
Correction, whenever a fighter doesn't make weight, I make a video on it because that's shocking news. It's no different than when David Benavidez, when he missed weight,
Right, but did you claim that David Benavidez and Jamal Charlo, that they were cheating in their fights and that this is disgraceful and that overall that, that this is a clear advantage for those guys? You weren't overall going on about that. Yes, Dante's Boxing Nation, you addressed it, but you glazed right over it. Quit bullshitting.
Fought Angulo and lost his title on the scale by nearly 3 pounds. But nobody in the boxing industry was talking about how, David, he had an advantage, or Charlo had an advantage.
Right, including you.
Or Shakur, because these are showcase fights. And this is the reason why
I do agree with that. But a big part of the reason also why you were not talking about it is because those are not really the targets that you're going after. Now, had those guys been Lomachenko, had they been, Fury, of course, he can fucking come in at 410 pounds and not be over the weight limit because he's at heavyweight. But had it been a fighter that you were trying to tear down, you would have mentioned it, Dante.
I didn't say too much about it. So if Ryan Garcia didn't make weight against Emmanuel Tago, then not too many people are going to talk about that.
You would have.
But if you miss weight fighting against Gervonta by 3 pounds, of course it's going to be big news. If Benavidez were to miss weight fighting against Canelo Alvarez by 3 pounds, of course it's going to be the top.
You would have gave no Canelo Alvarez excuses had David Benavidez missed weight by 3 pounds. You would have given him no excuses whatsoever had Canelo Alvarez been in a similar situation like this against a fighter that got knocked out last year and against a fighter that stated that he was drinking a lot. And I don't completely disbelieve him because, I do believe that he looked a little bit doughy around the midsection. And I think also on top of that, that when it comes down to it, that Ryan clearly was not on the same level of conditioning. So he was drinking or eating something, in order to calm his mind down. I don't think Ryan Garcia's camp was all about putting him in the best conditioning of his life. I think it was putting him in good enough condition, but really trying to ease his mind. I think that's really overall what really it was more about.
Pick up discussion.
Which, of course, proved to be more important than a little bit overall of what the physical conditioning was for this fight.
I mean, just think about the double standards. Gervonta, he's never missed weight before. And you have fans that still talk about him as if he has missed weight in the past, like when he fought against Prograis and even Lomachenko. So you can imagine what...
Right, but once again, Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation, you do talk about size advantages whenever it comes to certain favorite fighters of yours losing, or certain favorite fighters overall, or certain fighters that you need to try to tear down, All right, you do talk about that. Like when Fury ended up beating Deontay Wilder, even though both of those guys are relatively of the same physical dimensions in terms of height and reach, and Wilder is supposed to have the best power on the planet Earth, at least for a boxer, and he's supposed to somewhat be able to compete with Fury. Now all of a sudden that Fury whoops his ass. Now all of a sudden this weight's a big issue. And don't get me wrong, I do think, of course, the weight was a clear advantage for Tyson Fury. It's a part of the reason why he won that fight, or won those fights. It's definitely a factor. Is it, the main factor? No, Fury's just, a very great boxer. Wilder never has been, but at the end of the day, it definitely is a part of it. But Dante's Boxing Nation, he'll bring up weight when he needs to.
They would say if Devin Haney ever missed weight in a real big fight by 3 pounds. And speaking of David Benavidez, let me say this as well. Once again, when it comes to Devin Haney, they'll say, oh, well, he did the same thing to Regis Prograis. He's a weight bully, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You notice you guys have never heard me call David Benavidez a weight bully. He's very big at 168. But
yeah, you know why you don't call David Benavidez a weight bully? Because they're using David Benavidez as a pawn. So you don't get any extra brownie points from me overall by not calling David Benavidez. And what Dante's Boxing Nation is basically trying to state here is that, oh, well, you can't claim that it's racially motivated because, I never called David Benavidez a weight bully. You never called David Benavidez a weight bully because he's on your payroll. Because you and David Benavidez overall have a relationship overall together in terms to really try and promote each other. That's the reason why you don't talk badly about Mario Barrios and David Benavidez, Dante. You won't touch David Benavidez right now because he's pretty much, he's like your senator. He's like the next president in waiting. You need him, right? You need him to try to tear down some of the bigger targets like that of a Canelo Alvarez. You need him because you realize that you need to knock that dude off. That, you overall need to get someone new in office, in terms of that Mexican fighter, that you realize that Canelo's always going to be a major threat for that #1 pound-for-pound spot. And in terms of all-time great conversations, that's why you need David Benavidez. So that's the reason why you're not claiming that David Benavidez is a weight bully. All right, so you don't get any extra points overall from me in terms of that. Okay, because if it was a fighter overall that you really did need to tear down, like Usyk or Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury, we all know that we'd be hearing it.
Never talked about how he's just a weight bully because David Benavidez, he does his job to...
And David Benavidez, by the way, is a weight bully. David Benavidez, by the way, is a weight bully. He was a weight bully overall, even a little bit against Plant and Demetrius Andrade. And those guys, probably were only separated at that time by one weight class. But, dude, David Benavidez is not really a 168-pounder. That dude is like a fucking light heavyweight to a cruiserweight. Like David Benavidez should not even be at the 168-pound weight class.
The weight. Despite the fact he may have missed weight before, but he fixed those problems. And now he's making weight in that same weight class. Something that I don't think Ryan Garcia can do. But if he does manage to do it in the future, he should have did that against Devin Haney. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out.
But anyways, once again, I just thought that I would talk about that because Dante is a dude that, once again, he reminds me a lot of LeBron James. And I'm overall going to actually do a video recently on basketball, if y'all are interested in watching it. Because I like basketball. And of course, some of the first round matchups are starting to end at the current moment in time. So I'm going to do some videos on it. And on top of that, there's going to be a conversation about the quote-unquote GOAT conversation between that of Michael Jordan and LeBron James, because it's very clear that LeBron James's career is very closely coming to an end in my view. But we'll see where that goes. But I'll be talking about that. But the reason why Dante's Boxing Nation reminds me so much of LeBron James is because this dude is such a politician. Like, this dude overall will bring up a lot of surface level points overall that, they seem cool on the surface and they seem like it's the right thing on the surface. Kind of like LeBron James fans. Like, whenever they debate that LeBron James is the greatest of all time, they're like, oh, well, take a look at his stats. How can you argue that he could have done any more in this series? He led in every single stat. He led in assists. He led in points. Overall, he led in rebounds. How can you say that, overall that he was at fault, right? But what people don't understand, because most people really don't know shit about basketball, because it's such an intricate team game, when you lead in every single statistic, especially on those leaderboards, you're actually overall imposing your will against your own team. And you're leaving overall your offense to be more one-dimensional because the ball is mainly running through you. And what that basically means is that the players overall that are on your team, that they're only a marginal threat, that they're not going to be anywhere near as effective because they don't really have a dignified role. It's basically just to serve you. And Luka Doncic has a very similar problem. Russell Westbrook had a very similar problem. James Harden had a very similar problem. All right. But the reason why I state that is because kind of like the LeBron James fan arguments, like when people take a look at it on the surface, it seems like great arguments to debate why LeBron James is the greatest of all time. It's very similar with DontaesBoxingNation. Like people will take a look at it and state that, oh, well, Dante, he's really telling the truth on this stuff because, he really just sticks up for black fighters and all sort of stuff. That's not really just what Dante does, though. Like on the surface, DontaesBoxingNation will state things like, oh, well, can you believe that Lomachenko overall is debated as the #1 pound for pound and he only has like 12 fights on his record? Like this is an insult to boxing and they don't do this with any black fighters, but they only do it with Caucasian fighters. Right, but at the end of the day, what Dante would never tell you is that he dominated Gary Russell Jr., Guillermo Rigondeaux, Jorge Linares, and Nicholas Walters, all those guys, to get to that spot. And he fought nothing but champions to get to that spot. But then when it comes to other fighters, it doesn't matter, what a certain amount of fights they may have or who they fight. He puts them on the top 10 pound per pound list. Like when Dante was trying to criticize Canelo Alvarez's resume, what did he state? He said a bunch of surface level shit about, oh, well, can you believe that Canelo is fighting these weak European white boys and Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders? We all know that, black fighters and Latino fighters are usually the more elite historically, in the sport. And Canelo's fighting these Caucasian fighters. Like, he's fighting the third best in boxing, all this sort of shit. Right, so does that apply to every single standard? So does that mean when Terrence Bud Crawford fought Victor Postol and Jeff Horn that he was fighting the third best? Or did Dante give Terrence Bud Crawford, this credit for being a killer against guys overall that were elite level fighters? It's always very interesting, once again, that for his favorite fighters and for the fighters that he doesn't like, the standards are never applied the same. All right, it's just very particularly interesting. And keep in mind that Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, by the way, those two guys are better than Victor Postol and overall Jeff Horn. They're better than those guys. Yes, those guys were A grade level wins. Keep in mind that Billy Joe Saunders won against Dave Lemieux, all right, Andy Lee. He beat that of Chris Eubank, and a couple of other decent guys. Billy Joe Saunders was not some bum. And keep in mind that when Billy Joe Saunders versus Demetrius Andrade was getting set up, it was one of the biggest fights in boxing. That's what DontaesBoxingNation stated. And remember, Demetrius Andrade was supposed to tear right through Canelo Alvarez. When it came down to it, at one point in time, they also stated that Canelo was avoiding Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders. And then, Caleb Plant, after he got knocked out by Canelo, fought David Benavidez after he had already been stopped and lost. And it was one of the biggest fights of the year. And that this would be the biggest win in David Benavidez' career. Y'all remember that? It's just very interesting once again. A lot of people really truly, fall for this. But it is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later, and we'll see where this goes. As for Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis rematch, I don't really know if I see that fight happening right now. To be honest with you, I don't think that it's best for either fighter if that rematch happens right now. I think that you can let that fight build up a little bit, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.